All right. So, um, this is exciting. We're finally doing the deep dive you requested on Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yeah.
Specifically, the sections that you flagged on tiny changes,
Right.
systems
Right.
versus goals.
Uh-huh.
And those really interesting identity-based habits.
Absolutely.
Really, our goal here is to sort of help you understand how these concepts can be applied to your own life. So hopefully you're ready to unlock the power of habit.
Absolutely. I think one of the most fascinating things about this book is really realizing that tiny changes that are consistently applied over time lead to remarkable results.
Yeah.
It's amazing what consistency can do.
Well, and the book kind of kicks off with Clear's story, which is a pretty intense story to kick off a book with.
Yeah.
But he was, in high school, he had a pretty serious baseball injury. I mean, serious enough to land him in a medically induced coma,
Yeah.
which I can't even imagine bouncing back from something like that.
It was a long road to recovery. He had to relearn basic motor patterns, but he was determined. He was absolutely determined to overcome that setback. And this experience really became the foundation of his work on habits because he realized that even when you're faced with these monumental challenges,
Yeah.
consistent small improvements, or as he calls them, atomic habits, can lead to just incredible transformations.
I mean, it's funny because, you think about that classic saying, we are what we repeatedly do,
Yes.
and it's true. It's not about one, huge effort that you put in one time. It's really the tiny choices we make every day that make us who we are. So if we want to change our lives, we need to change our habits.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, it sounds so simple, but
Yeah.
it's really kind of profound when you think about it.
Absolutely. And this actually leads us to a point that might surprise you a little bit. Clearbar actually argues against being solely goal-oriented.
Really.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, I feel like goal setting is like the key to success. How can you argue with that?
Well, think about it this way. Winners and losers often have the same goals.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's not the goal itself that's making the difference.
Right.
In fact, goals can actually be a bit of a trap.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Tell me more about how goals can be a trap.
Well, for one thing, goals keep us fixated on this future state
Right.
rather than on the actions that we need to be taking today.
Yeah.
It's kind of like staring at the top of the mountain without figuring out the path to get there.
So it's not enough to just have the destination in mind.
Right.
You need to have a roadmap for actually getting there.
Exactly. And that roadmap is what Clear calls a system. Systems are about optimizing the process, the daily routines and actions that will eventually lead to that desired outcome.
So instead of obsessing over losing 20 pounds,
Right.
I should be focused on building a system that supports healthy eating
Uh-huh.
and exercise.
That's exactly.
Or instead of dreaming of writing a book, I need to establish a daily writing routine.
Precisely. And, the beauty of that is when you focus on the system,
Yeah.
the results naturally follow.
So it's really about shifting the focus from the outcome to the process.
Exactly.
All right. What are some of the other pitfalls of just solely focusing on goals?
Well, another issue is that it can kind of delay your happiness.
Oh, interesting.
You start thinking, I'll be happy when I achieve this goal, instead of finding joy and fulfillment in the journey itself.
Wow, I never thought of it like that. It's like focusing on the process rather than the end goal can be incredibly freeing in a way.
It can be a really big shift in perspective.
Yeah.
And this actually leads to a fascinating concept in the book, identity-based habits.
This is the part that I'm really kind of curious
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
So what exactly are identity-based habits?
It's really this feedback loop between your actions and your beliefs. Your habits shape your identity, but your identity also influences your habits.
So it's not just about doing the habit. It's about becoming the type of person who embodies that habit.
Precisely. For example, if you see yourself as a healthy person, you're more likely to make choices that align with that identity. Eating nutritious food, exercising, getting enough sleep.
Right.
And each time you act in alignment with that identity, it further reinforces that belief about yourself.
That makes me think about some of the habits that I've tried to build and maybe why I've struggled. I was too focused on the outcome rather than thinking about the type of person I wanted to be.
Right. It's a powerful shift in perspective. And this kind of begs the question, what type of person do you want to be?
Yeah,
And what habits would that person have?
I'm going to need some time to ponder that one.
Ugh.
But let's move on to the more practical side of things. So how do we actually go about building these identity-based habits?
Well, that's where Clear's 4 laws of behavior change come into play. It's really a framework that gives us a practical approach to building better habits. Are you ready to break those down?
Absolutely. But I think first we need to take a quick break.
Okay, so let's unpack those 4 laws. They are make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. And they're very simple, but incredibly effective when you understand how to apply them.
It sounds almost too simple. Like, how can just making something obvious or attractive really change my habits?
Well, let's start with make it obvious. It all begins with awareness. We need to recognize those cues that trigger our habits, both the good and the bad ones.
So, like, noticing that every time I walk into the kitchen after work, I automatically reach for the bag of chips on the counter.
Exactly.
That's definitely a cue I need to be more aware of.
Yeah, and once you're aware of the cue, then you can start to change your response. Clear suggests using what he calls implementation intentions,
Okay.
which is basically deciding exactly when and where you'll perform the habit you're trying to build.
So instead of just vaguely saying, I'm going to meditate more,
Mhm.
I could say, after I pour my cup of coffee each morning, I will meditate for 1 minute.
That's a perfect example. By linking your desired habit to a specific cue, you're making it much more likely to happen. It removes that decision fatigue and kind of turns it into an automatic response.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So what about the second law, make it attractive? How can we make our habits more appealing?
Well, this is where the power of social norms comes into play.
Okay.
We're naturally inclined to imitate the habits of those around us. So if all of your friends are hitting the gym after work, you're much more likely to join them than if you're trying to go it solo.
It's like that feeling of everyone else is doing it, so I should too.
Mm,
Which I definitely feel that pull sometimes.
exactly. So think about how you can leverage this in your own life. Surround yourself with people who have the habits that you want to develop. Join a running club, find a workout buddy, or simply share your intentions with your friends and family so they can support you.
Yeah, just creating that support network can be really powerful.
Mm.
Okay, let's move on to the third law. Make it easy. This one definitely resonates with me because I'm all about reducing friction in my life.
Me too. This law is all about minimizing the effort required to perform the habit. One of Clear's most effective strategies is something he calls the 2-minute rule.
2-minute rule. Okay, tell me more about that.
The idea is that you break down any habit into its simplest form, something that can be done in 2 minutes or less. So instead of trying to write a whole chapter of your book, you commit to just writing one paragraph. Or instead of cleaning your entire house, you just focus on clearing off the kitchen counter.
So it's like tricking your brain into getting started by making that initial step so ridiculously easy that it's almost impossible not to do it.
Precisely. Once you overcome that initial inertia, you're much more likely to keep going.
Yeah,
It builds momentum and helps you establish consistency.
I love that. I can definitely see how that could be applied to so many different habits I'm trying to build.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the fourth and final law. Make it satisfying. I mean, this one sounds pretty straightforward. Who doesn't love a good reward?
Right. It's all about associating the habit with a positive feeling. We're much more likely to repeat a behavior when it's immediately rewarding. And this is where it gets really interesting because Clear emphasizes the importance of choosing rewards that align with your desired identity.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It's not just about any old reward. It needs to be something that's meaningful and
Yeah.
connected to the bigger picture. So if my goal is to save money, maybe my reward for consistently transferring funds to my savings account could be taking that same amount of money out of my, like, fun money envelope and putting it into a jar that's labeled trip to Italy or something.
Yeah.
That way I have a tangible reminder of what I'm working towards.
That's a fantastic example. By connecting the habit to a positive emotion or a tangible reward that represents that larger goal,
Yeah.
you're reinforcing your desired identity and making it much more likely to stick.
Yeah, these 4 laws are so insightful. They really seem to apply to almost any habit you're trying to build.
Absolutely.
But what happens when we hit a plateau, or we start getting bored of our routine? How do we keep things challenging and engaging?
Well, that's where something called the Goldilocks rule comes in.
Yes, the sweet spot. Tell me more about how that applies to habit formation.
So this concept suggests that peak motivation happens when we're working on tasks that are right on the edge of our current abilities.
Okay.
If a task is too easy, we get bored. If it's too hard, we get frustrated and give up. So it's about finding that perfect balance of challenge and enjoyment.
So how do we find that Goldilocks zone for the habits that we're trying to build?
It's all about constantly challenging yourself, but in small increments. So once a habit becomes easy, find ways to make it slightly more challenging.
So for example, if running a mile has become too easy, maybe I try running a mile and a half.
Exactly.
Or try running the same distance but at a faster pace.
That's it. The key is to keep pushing your boundaries, but not so much that you get discouraged. Experiment with different variations and find that sweet spot that keeps you engaged and motivated.
That makes a lot of sense.
Oh,
Wow, this deep dive has given me so much to think about.
yeah.
What other interesting tidbits from the book stand out to you?
Well, one of the things that really fascinated me was Clear's discussion of environment design. He argues that we're more likely to succeed when our environment supports our desired habits.
Oh, interesting.
It's about making the cues for good habits obvious and the cues for bad habits invisible,
So if I'm trying to eat healthier, I should get rid of all the junk food in my pantry
right?
and stock my fridge with healthy snacks. And if I want to read more, I should make sure there's always a book on my nightstand or in my bag.
Yep.
So I'm setting myself up for success by creating an environment that nudges me in the right direction.
Precisely. It's much easier to stick to your habits when you're not constantly battling temptation. You're essentially removing the friction and making it as effortless as possible to make the healthy choice.
Clear also talks about the power of habit shaping, gradually increasing the difficulty or complexity of a habit over time.
Right.
So it's about starting small and slowly scaling up.
Exactly. It's about building momentum and mastery step by step.
Mhm.
Think about learning a new language. Instead of trying to have full conversations right away, you start by learning a few new words each day,
Right.
then gradually start building sentences, then paragraphs, and so on.
That's a perfect example. So it's about making that initial step so small that it's almost impossible to fail. And then once you've established consistency, you can gradually increase the challenge.
Exactly.
And this brings up another point. Celebrating those small wins along the way. I feel like sometimes we get so focused on that end goal that we forget to acknowledge the progress we're making.
Right.
But celebrating small wins is so crucial for maintaining motivation.
Absolutely.
It helps us stay engaged. It reinforces those positive feelings that are associated with the habit. So maybe I could treat myself to a new book every time I finish reading one,
Yeah.
or plan a fun weekend outing for every month that I stick to my budget.
Those are great ideas. And the rewards don't have to be big or expensive. It's the act of acknowledging your progress that really matters.
Yeah, all this talk about rewards makes me think about the role of accountability. Clear also emphasizes the power of having an accountability partner. It's like having that built-in support system to cheer us on and keep us motivated.
Yeah, accountability can be a very powerful tool for staying on track. It's much harder to slip up when we know someone is watching and we're going to have to answer to them. Clear even suggests creating what he calls a habit contract, where you outline your goals, your plan of action, and the consequences for not following through.
A habit contract sounds pretty intense. Does it have to be like super formal?
No, not at all. It could be as simple as agreeing to text your accountability partner every morning when you complete your workout, or maybe make a small donation to a charity if you miss a day.
I love that. Just adding a little extra incentive to stay committed.
Exactly. The key is to make the consequences meaningful enough to deter you from slacking off, but not so severe that they create unnecessary pressure or guilt.
So it's about finding that balance between support and motivation. I'm really starting to see how all these pieces fit together. It's not just about willpower or motivation. It's about understanding the science of habit formation and using these proven strategies to our advantage.
Exactly. Atomic Habits really provides us with this powerful toolkit for creating positive change step by tiny step.
Yeah.
And remember, even small changes can lead to remarkable results over time.
Wow, this has been a fantastic deep dive.
It has.
We've uncovered so much valuable information from Atomic Habits. I'm really feeling inspired to take action and start building those better habits.
That's great. That's what it's all about. It's about taking these concepts and putting them into practice in your own life. And, you don't have to overhaul your whole life at once. You can start small, focus on one habit at a time, be patient with the process.
You mentioned earlier the importance of celebrating those small wins.
Yeah.
Are there any other tips or tools that Clear suggests for staying motivated and on track?
Well, one technique that can be really effective is habit tracking. It's a great way to kind of monitor your consistency, see your progress visually, and celebrate those wins. Plus, it can also help you identify patterns in your behavior, like maybe there are some sneaky triggers that are derailing your efforts.
I've tried using habit trackers in the past, but I don't know. I often forget to update them or I get discouraged if I miss a day. Do you have any tips for making habit tracking more effective?
The key is finding a system that works for you and makes tracking as effortless as possible. Some people like using a simple calendar or a journal,
Right.
while others might prefer an app or a spreadsheet. Just experiment with different methods until you find one that you enjoy and that you can stick with. And remember, don't beat yourself up if you miss a day. Just get back on track as soon as possible.
Consistency over perfection. I like that. Clear also talks about the importance of reflection and review, taking time to evaluate what's working and what's not. What's the best way to approach that?
Well, reflection is crucial for continuous improvement. It helps you to fine-tune your approach and make adjustments as needed. Clear recommends setting aside time each week or each month, whatever works best for you,
Yeah.
to review your progress, celebrate your wins, and identify areas where you might need to tweak your strategy a little bit. Think of it as a progress report for your habits.
It's like having a regular check-in with yourself to
Mhm.
see how things are going and make sure you're still on track. I feel like this whole conversation has been like having a personalized coaching session on habit formation.
I'm glad to hear
I
that.
feel like I have a whole new set of tools and strategies to work with.
That's fantastic. And remember, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Start small, be consistent, and enjoy the process.
This deep dive has been incredible, just an incredible journey into the world of habit formation. I feel so much more empowered now to take control of my habits and make meaningful progress in my life. And for anyone listening, I just want to leave you with this one thought. What is one small habit you can start today that would make the biggest difference in your life over the next year? Think about that. Until next time, keep diving deep.